question for Ian McKee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could I ask the First Minister what the expected economic impact in Scotland would be of the UK Government's proposal to allow fathers to take up to 10 months paternity leave?
First Minister.
Well, there is an economic impact, but we welcome the UK Government's proposals on enabling fathers to share the care of their children. Scotland is leading the way on addressing inequalities between men and women, improving support for families, especially during the early years of a child's life when this can make such a key difference.
Ian McKee.
I thank the First Minister for his answer and share his welcome of the proposed arrangements, which will allow fathers to bond more closely with their children in the important early years of life. Does he agree with me that any possible short-term increased cost or loss of productivity caused by this policy will be more than offset by the improved social and educational consequences of allowing both parents to play an active part in their child's upbringing?
The estimates for economic impact were based on a 4 to 8% take-up and suggest that 1% of small business would be affected on that basis. These estimates were produced by the last Westminster Government and are shared by the present Westminster Government. But I do accept Ian McKee's point that there is substantial evidence on the importance of parental support and attachment in terms of a child's development and well-being. We know too that the impact of parental neglect on a child can be extremely damaging and can be permanent. Supporting parents is therefore one of the cornerstones of the early years framework, and I agree that maximising positive paternal time with young children will pay dividends for the future. And I think there is unanimity politically that substantial enhancement investment in the future makes this measure worth supporting.
Question 5, Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what contribution the Scottish Government made to securing the recent renewable energy deal with China involving Shanghai Huanan Boiler and Vessel Cochrane and W2E Engineering Limited.
First Minister.
Well, neither the Chinese or the Scottish Government were directly involved in the commercial agreement itself, but Scottish Development International provided its normal investment support.
Elaine Murray.
I wonder, therefore, if the First Minister is in a position to advise what the deal means for the two companies' subsidiaries in Dumfriesshire, as Cochrane Limited last week appeared to be unaware of the deal and also has submitted a petition to Dumfries Sheriff Court requesting that Waste Energy Engineering Limited be wound up, claiming that a bill worth several thousands of pounds owed in connection with the ScotGen Dumfries plant has not actually been paid. Now, the First Minister was quite keen to claim some publicity around this deal at the beginning of the week, and I wonder, in connection with that publicity, can he assure us that this actually means jobs in the Annan area and money coming into Dumfriesshire?
First Minister.
Well, I'm aware that there's been some confusion locally about the extent of Cochrane Limited's involvement in this agreement. The origin of the confusion is that the use of the SHBV of its brand name in China, which is SHBV Cochrane. Cochrane Limited itself is not a signatory to the agreement, although it's a potential beneficiary of the deal, a fact confirmed by SHBV in a press statement of 13th of January, which I'll be happy to send the member. Can I say to Elaine Murray that Chinese direct investment in Scotland is undoubtedly, in my view, a good thing. There are companies in Scotland which would not be trading at the present moment without that investment. The announcements that were made at the beginning of last week are going to be immense benefit to many workers in Scotland, not least at the Grangemouth refinery, and to many industries in Scotland, not least the whisky and salmon industries. Surplus countries like China must be encouraged to directly invest in our economy. And that developing relationship is something which should carry the support of every single member of this chamber.
Question 6, John Scott.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to eliminate the discarding of fish.
First Minister.
Well, I think John Scott's quite right to raise this issue. Across Europe, fishermen are forced to discard, and have been for generations, perfectly good fish dead back into the sea. It's a waste of perfectly good, healthy food, of a vital economic resource. The Scottish Government, as John Scott knows, has been working with fishermen and other stakeholders, and we are leading the way to reduce the discarding of fish. This year, our innovative catch quota system was the largest in Europe, one of a number of measures we are taking to reduce discards. Reducing discards will continue to be a priority for this Government, along with returning powers over fisheries, full powers, back to Scotland. I know that many members support our action against discards, just as many members across this chamber are vehemently critical of the common fisheries policy.
John Scott.
I thank the First Minister for that response. And most right-thinking people are outraged by discarding, indeed none more so than the fishermen who are fighting for their livelihoods. And indeed, given that 41 boats have been tied up this year, and yet they are forced to implement this dreadful practice. The First Minister will be aware of fishermen's unease with the catch quota approach taken by his government, but he will also be aware too that the UK government has called for an end to discarding, coupled with more decentralised decision-making, which will be vital to achieving this. In light of this, will the Scottish Government redouble its efforts to work with UK ministers, European officials and, crucially, Scotland's fishermen to develop other ways of reducing discards in addition to catch quotas and so end discarding for good?
First Minister.
Well, if we're going to end discarding, then it requires fishermen to be allowed to land what they catch. The catch quota system is designed to enhance quota to allow that to take place. The catch quota system is extremely popular and has been several times oversubscribed in the application for places within the scheme. The one thing I would say, it is vitally important that the enhancement of quota is sufficient to allow the catch quota system to operate fully. But John Scott, I'm sure will understand, since I made, because I looked it up when I saw his question, I made my first speech about discarding and motion in the House of Commons in December 1988. So it has been a long-term campaign of mine, and I think just about every other fishing MP, to see this obscenity removed from fisheries policy. I hope he will agree that the catch quota system must be allowed the opportunity to provide part of the answer.
Maureen Watt.
Does the First Minister share my view that the only way for the Scottish Government to have a real voice when it comes to the common fisheries policy and progressing innovative policies on discards and maintaining healthy fish stocks is for Scotland to become a full independent member of the European Union?
First Minister.
Yes, I do. There are two aspects of the common fisheries policy that I'll never be able to understand. One, in discards we've been discussing, it is obscenity and should be removed. The other, of course, is the fact that under the common fisheries policy, landlocked member states, many of which no doubt Ian Gray has insulted from time to time, that landlocked member states have more say over deciding fisheries policy than the nation of Scotland, which has a vast proportion of the territorial waters in the European Union. That is why only an independent Scotland will have a seat at the top table and be able to defend the rights of our fishing and rural communities.
Ian MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Well, I share the First Minister's concerns about the extent of discards and indeed the criticisms of the current common fisheries policy. He will be aware of the criticisms levelled this week at the catch quota approach, one that Bertie Armstrong, the leader of the SFF, described as a perfect control measure for enforcing a system of management that is broken. In that context, what would the First Minister say to those Scottish whitefish skippers who have already registered with POs south of the border, and those contemplating doing so as a result of concerns about the approach being taken to catch quotas and indeed conservation credits?
First Minister.
Well, what I say to Liam is two things. One is that the catch quota system is clearly extremely popular. It's been substantially oversubscribed in terms of applications to the system. It is certainly the case, and he shouldn't give the impression that the Scottish Fishermen's Federation are against the principle of catch quotas, because they've made it clear on many occasions that they are not. The concern is whether or not the enhanced quota will allow the catch quota system to operate properly. That is exactly what Richard Lochhead and his officials are dealing with at the present moment. But in terms of the common fisheries policy, where I share the criticism, and I remember, of course, that his leader had to resign from a government once on the issue of the common fisheries policy. If people are going to be critical of the common fisheries policy, as Liam MacArthur and I am, then they have to put forward two things. One is proposals to mitigate the impact that it has and keeps having on our fishing communities. The catch quota system, which will enhance the quota available to Scotland as well as available to individual fishermen, is an attempt to do that. And secondly, it's not a policy just to criticise the common fisheries policy. There has to be an alternative, a different style and system of managing this resource. And that's why I've always believed that national management of resources is perfectly compatible with European policy, and it's what we should seek as a Parliament if we are going to take best advantage of our position as one of the most plentiful fishing countries in the whole of the European continent.
Margaret MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I normally refer to fish with a twist of lemon and a shake of black pepper, but if I'm allowed to intervene in this debate, there is an alternative to the suggestion made by Maureen Watt. If Alex Salmond has been trying since 1988 to make sense of the common fisheries policy, does he not draw some sort of lesson from that, that maybe we should just get out of the European Union altogether?
First Minister.
Well, I don't draw that conclusion. I would rather just change the common fisheries policy and allow us control of our own resources on fish and other things. But I do agree with Margaret MacDonald that the common fisheries policy is rather like the Schleswig-Holstein in European history. Only 3 people ever understood it. One's mad, one's dead, and I've forgotten.
That concludes questions to the First Minister. I suspend this sitting till 2:15.